Mhm. All right, guys, I forgot to set up a poll about what we're naming our little flamingo. So I put the leading options down at the bottom. If you want to select a stamp, you can vote by marking next to your favorite choice with that stamp. Mary, go ahead.
I don't think did I get my vote in? I'm not sure.
It doesn't tell me who voted.
Okay, because I'm not sure it's working for me.
Okay. Well, you can also put it in the chat if you want to make sure.
Okay.
All right. Once again, we've got a pretty diverse selection. It looks like most of the votes are for Hamilton. With Daphne Franny Hamilton going by Daphne as the other leading contender. All right, so let's go with Daphne Hamilton or Daphne Franny Hamilton. I got to admit, I like Daphne myself. So there's a little bit of bias there. So Daphne Franny Hamilton, you can call me Daphne or Hamilton. Oh, there we go. Okay. Now, unfortunately, it's time for me to clear the screen and get started with the lecture. I don't think these announcements are anything new. The review quiz and the review short answer questions are due Sunday, the 13th before midnight. They both cover the material from the beginning of the semester to that little bit of discussion of finches and canaries that we covered last time we met. And these do not cover internal anatomy. Internal anatomy will be on next week's quiz. I did look up a couple of things that people had questions about. So the sclerotic eye ring, that bone in the eye. The general consensus is it has something to do with vision. But when I went looking for scientific papers on that, it's not clear that anybody's done much to scientifically demonstrate this. So, I mean, it makes sense. It's in the eye. It probably has to do with vision. And we know that birds that are active at night have a different shaped sclerotic eye ring than birds that are active in the daytime. But that's about the extent of what we actually know for sure. So, or at least what I could find by looking on looking at the scientific literature. Not being my field of study, I may have missed something, but I couldn't find anything. And owls eating their offspring, same kind of story. The only thing I found about that was a site where somebody was asking about it, and an ornithologist chimed in and said, well, it may happen occasionally, but it's not a normal thing. Faith, go ahead.
Yeah, I've actually I remember watching I remember hearing about yeah, cannibalism is less common in birds, but there are certain species that will occasionally eat their young if they're either sick, dying, or if they're like, or if they can't feed them all.
Mhm.
For example, if if a chick has already died, then the parent could choose to eat it just to dispose of the body before it can attract parasites.
Mhm.
Or it might try to, or certain species might try to kill or eat parasitic chicks
Mhm.
placed in their nest by another bird,
No, that makes sense.
or a chick that they mistake for, or a chick that they mistake for another bird. Birds aren't really great at identifying which offspring is theirs and which isn't.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense. I didn't, like I said, well, I went looking in the scientific literature and didn't see any discussions. So it probably means it happens, but mostly in predatory birds anyway. And like you described, probably mostly in situations where the chick is either dying or has died or is a cowbird or some other parasite.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Great, thanks. Okay. So we kind of ended when we were talking about the respiratory system of the birds. And I want to remind you of these concepts. Annotate. Flight requires a lot of energy. Energy requires oxygen. So the respiratory system of birds has a much larger volume than the corresponding respiratory system in mammals. And it is more efficient in birds than in mammals. So I put stars beside some of these things. Think that might be a hint? So we were talking about the one-way airflow through the respiratory system of the birds. And I said we were going to come back to this again because it is kind of hard. Can I go back one? This one or one more? The one with the stars. Okay. When I leave the page, we lose the stars, but I'll put them back for you. Star, star, star. And there's my additional comment about how respiration is more efficient in birds than in mammals. Great. So we went over this last time. I really want to go over it a second time because it can be a little bit confusing. It's much more complicated than our respiratory system. So for our respiratory system, we've got lung. Oh, this is going to look wrong. I'm going to clear that drawing. See if I can draw it. Let's make the lungs really big so it doesn't look perverse. We breathe in. Okay, yes, everybody's laughing at me. That's fine. So we breathe air in, it goes into our lungs. The oxygen comes out into the bloodstream. Carbon dioxide goes into the lungs. Carbon dioxide is a waste product of cellular energy. So your cells release carbon dioxide when they make energy and use energy. And of course, then we exhale that carbon dioxide. So we inhale, we get our oxygen, we exhale carbon dioxide. But there's only one way in and one way out. It comes in, the air comes in, the air goes out. In birds, the air comes in, bypasses the lungs, and goes to the posterior air sac. When the bird exhales, the air in the posterior air sac goes to the lungs. And now we have our gas exchange. We have oxygen leaving the lungs, going into the bloodstream, and carbon dioxide coming out of the bloodstream and into the lungs. Then the bird inhales again, and the air from the lungs goes into this anterior air sac. And on the last exhale, the air from the anterior air sac is exhaled from the bird. Now, notice how on the inhalation bird, the top bird here, we have two lines. Both of these are happening at the same time. So while the bird is inhaling new air, the air that was in its lungs is moving into the anterior air sacs. When the bird exhales, the air moves from the air sacs. Some of it goes to the lungs. The stuff from the anterior air sac leaves the body. And those happen at the same time as well. So for each breath of air, it spins 2 rounds of respiration inside the bird. So it inhales, that air is in the bird. Even though it exhales, that air is still in the bird. Inhale again, still in the bird. Exhale again, now it's out. Mary, go ahead.
So is that like the first inhalation, is that kind of push the next one along? It forces the first one, the original one?
Not quite.
Okay.
So when we inhale, we have a diaphragm that goes across the bottom of the cavity where the lungs are, and the diaphragm is pulled down, and your rib cage is pulled up and out. And those two things happening when we inhale create a vacuum in the lungs, which brings the air in. We get the same thing going on with these air sacs. The air sacs are being pulled open, and that causes air to move into those air sacs. And then when the bird is exhaling, the air sacs are then released and they're squeezed down, just like when we exhale, our diaphragm moves back up and our rib cage kind of moves back down and in to decrease the amount of space in our lungs. Does that help or confuse things more? Okay, good. All right, so if you need a screenshot, now's the time to take it. Okay. So, critical points. It is very efficient. I haven't explained this one yet. I'm getting ready to. Birds have no diaphragm. We have a diaphragm, but birds don't. So if you're grabbing hold of the bird and you're holding very tightly around their rib cage, they can't breathe. So you need to be careful when you're holding birds, when you're restraining them, that there's enough room for them to breathe. Breathe. And it takes some experience to figure out how much force is enough to hold the bird still while still allowing breathing. So it's one of those things that the more you practice, the better you get at it. If you're new to handling birds, watch and make sure they're breathing. Now, I haven't mentioned yet about the hollow bones. So bird bones are hollow. This is not part of the respiratory system directly. I mean, air does move between the respiratory system and the hollow bones, but it's to help with heat management. Moving muscles creates heat. Flying moves a lot of muscles. So the big bones in the bird's wings are hollow so that there can be an exchange of heat between the muscles and the respiratory system, which means that birds can exhale some of that heat. Birds don't sweat the way we do. So getting rid of the excess heat, they have to do different tactics. And the hollow bones are really important for that. How's everybody doing? Everybody got that one? Great. So I'm going to move on again. And now we're going to talk about the digestive system. So we've been talking about flight. So I want to talk about migration briefly. With migration, birds are flying very long distances. They're often flying for most of the day or most of the night. Some birds migrate at night. And so they need to worry about both having enough stored energy to make those long distance migrations, as well as weight. So during migration, birds can shrink their intestines. What's really going on is they are absorbing part of their intestines for energy. But this also reduces weight. When they land at their destination, either their breeding grounds or their migratory grounds, they then regrow that intestine. Woe indeed. Tanya, I don't know if you're aware of it, but you're sending me direct messages instead of to everybody. Okay. Now, when we think about eating, I'm going to start by talking about birds that eat meat. Raptors, the hawks, the eagles, and that sort of stuff can tear their food. Owls cannot. So owls swallow food whole. Michaela, I don't know if you're aware that your camera's on. It's a little distracting because I see an image of you walking around. Thank you. Sorry about that. So owls must regurgitate fur and bones. It's not a problem, Michaela. I don't mind. I like having people with cameras on, but when you're moving, it's just a moving image can be distracting. Okay, so you probably know that owls regurgitate fur and bones, and these are called owl pellets. And sometimes in school, you get the opportunity to dissect owl pellets and pull out all the little bones and everything. It's a fun thing to do. I did that once with, it wasn't this class, but what in another class. And one of my students found all of the bones from a single mouse and basically reconstructed the skeleton of the mouse. It was really neat. Okay. Vultures also, whoops. Oh, I had clicked over here. Vultures also have some unique characteristics. They have a different collection of bacteria in their digestive tract and much stronger stomach acid. I'm just going to call it stomach acid. They don't, you know. Than most species have, which allows them to eat rotting meat. So they can eat things that have been dead for a while. Now, they also have a superpower. If you don't think being able to eat roadkill is a superpower, they have another superpower. Their defense mechanism is projectile vomiting. So if you pick up an injured vulture, make sure you're not in the line of fire. I've been vomited on by a turkey vulture before, and as a biologist, I'm not easily grossed out, but that was disgusting. I mean, it was absolutely disgusting. It smelled bad. It landed in my hand and it was warm and yeah, that was a challenging day. All right, so these kinds of things, these little tidbits that I've got on here, these are just specialized things. It's talking about owls, it's talking about migration and vultures. But I want to talk some about the general, most birds kind of digestive system. So this is a good place for a screenshot. Birds' digestive system have parts that we do not. Birds, all birds have a gizzard. Which is a strong, hard, muscular structure. We all remember birds do not have teeth. So they can't chew their food. The gizzard does the chewing. So it's the food goes into the gizzard, and the walls of the gizzard squeeze the food and move it around. And in some species, there will be little stones in there, and it might move the food across those stones to kind of break it up into smaller pieces, which makes it easier for the rest of the digestive tract to break the food down and absorb it. So all birds have this. Some birds also have a crop. This is found in hawks, eagles, parrots, pigeons, and doves. And it is a food storage organ. So hawks and eagles, because they're predatory, they are going to kill their prey, eat as much as they can, and then fly off somewhere to digest. And they do this because they can't constantly catch food and eat just a little bit, and then catch food and eat just a little bit, and then catch food and eat just a little bit. Birds that are seed and insect eaters tend not to have a crop because they can find food all day long without a huge expenditure of energy, without needing to spend a lot of time and effort on it. Pigeons and doves eat this way because they are seed specialists. So their diet is lower in energy than a diet that has insects included. Insects are much more energy dense than seeds. And so pigeons and doves will eat as much seed as they can and then, fly off and digest it. They're also prey species for a lot of predators, and they eat on the ground, which makes them vulnerable to a lot of predators. So it's better to binge and fly off and rest somewhere safe. I'm not really sure why parrots have a crop, but they do. It may have something to do with the way they raise their offspring. I'm not quite sure there. In addition to storing food in the crop's just the sac, and it's kind of in the throat of the bird. In pigeons and doves, the crop makes milk. Like milk that mammals make, it's a nutritious liquid that they use to feed their offspring. So if you watch birds feed their babies, most birds, the baby's got the mouth open and mom and dad are stuffing food in it. In pigeons and doves, mom or dad has their beak open and the baby has its beak inside of the parent's throat to get that crop milk. And we can see the full crop here on this hawk. Faith, yes, go ahead.
So I've also heard of flamingos doing this. So they regurgitate milk.
Yep.
That is very interesting because I know most people think like milk comes from mammary glands, but I guess in these birds, they literally regurgitate milk. That is,
Yeah.
or produce it in that
Yeah,
is the
in the crop.
craziest thing ever.
Yes. There's a lot of discussion among biologists. A lot of people don't like calling it milk because milk is produced by mammals. So they're like, we can't call it milk because it's basically the same thing. If you think about it, it's a liquid that you feed your young. And we have learned that lots of other non-mammals produce liquid nourishment for their offspring. So it's not just restricted to mammals anymore. We've got these birds. The most bizarre one I've heard of is cockroaches. Also secrete a form of milk. So yes, very bizarre. Okay, so here's this hawk with a full crop. You can see that when they've just fed. And this is a baby parrot. And you can see it's got a full crop as well. This makes parrots and parakeets a little bit easier to hand rear, as also pigeons and doves, because you can fill the crop and then you don't have to feed them quite as often because they can digest out of their crop. Okay, so that's digestive system. The next thing we're going to talk about is reproduction, and not so much breeding. We'll discuss breeding a little later in the semester, raising the offspring and that kind of stuff. Generally speaking, for most bird species, both parents help raise the chicks. And in some species, if one parent dies, oh yes, we're going to get to bird genitals. Yes. In some species, if one parent dies, the other one just literally cannot keep up with the food demands of the chick. And that is the case with the albatross. All right, so here is an albatross with a researcher, so you can get an idea of the size of these birds. The one on the right is the albatross named Wisdom. You guys heard about Wisdom? Nope. Okay. Wisdom is at least 71 years old. And in 2021, she raised a chick, she and her mate. She's had a couple of different mates in her lifetime. When we think about birds pairing up, most bird species, if they are successful raising chicks one year, will come back to the same mate the next year. if they're not successful, they are more likely to break up and try and find a different mate. Even birds that so-called mate for life, they break up sometimes. It's just like people. A lot of people get married and spend their whole life with one partner, but some people don't. That happens this way too. Yeah, Faith, go ahead.
What I find the most interesting about this is that many species that supposedly mate for life actually do a lot of cheating and sneaking around on the side. Particularly, there are some species, for example, fairy wrens. If you watch them for an entire breeding season, they would seem like they were monogamous. But after dark, female fairy wrens sneak off. Female fairy wrens sneak off and copulate on the side with other males. And we know this because only a certain percentage of chicks raised in a fairy wren's nest are the mate's biological offspring. And that kind of makes sense because it's risky to put all your eggs in one basket. So the mother can create diversity in her offspring if she fertilizes her eggs from multiple fathers.
Yep. Yeah, you are absolutely right. Since we've been able to do genetic analysis, we've discovered that a lot of birds, probably most birds, participate in what's called extra pair copulation or cheating. The male will go off to neighboring nests and breed with females. The female goes off and mates with neighboring males. And yeah. Yep. Very, very common. And while we're talking about breeding and albatross, it takes 2 albatross to raise a chick. And one of the species of albatross, in the Laysan albatross, males have a higher mortality rate than females. And so you end up with more females than males. So what happens? 2 females will pair up. One will breed with a male that is raising a chick with somebody else, and the 2 females will raise the chick. And very often when this happens, those same 2 females will get together the next year, and the other female will be the one to breed and lay an egg. Because it's better to have a partner help you raise your offspring and only have an offspring every other year than not be able to raise offspring at all. Okay. And now, oh, sorry, I erased that one. Let's talk about the cloaca. So humans have multiple exits from the body. Birds only have a cloaca, one opening for urine, feces, and eggs. And in most species, males lack a penis. So in order to pass sperm to the female, they do something called a cloacal kiss. They literally press the cloacas against each other. In addition, females only have one ovary Again, this is to keep weight down for flight. But they also have specialized structures to produce the shell. The egg is fertilized before the shell is produced. If you make the shell first, the sperm can't get in. And as a general rule, there's less than 48 hours between breeding and egg laying, or between fertilization. Now, despite that, again, in most species, females can hold sperm for up to 2 weeks. So a female can mate with a male and for a 2-week time period, lay a series of eggs using sperm from that one breeding period. This is most species. Okay, screenshot time. Brace yourself, everybody. Ducks have penises. This is a duck penis. So, ducks and ratites, ostriches, emus, that sort of stuff, they do have penises. So in ducks, the penis is corkscrew shaped. And in ducks, males are incredibly aggressive breeders. They will harass females to death, literally. They have literally been people who've seen male ducks kill female ducks because they're being so aggressive about this. So they can kill females. Yeah, it is terrible. They also don't care about species very much or sex of the other duck. And in fact, they don't really care if the potential partner is alive or dead. There's a award. So you've probably heard of the Nobel Prizes. There's also an award called the Ig Nobel Prize, which is for really, really bizarre scientific research or publications. And it was awarded to an ornithologist a few years back. This ornithologist worked in a building that had glass windows, really big glass windows. And it was a real problem because birds would hit the glass a lot. And so he was very used to, he'd hear a bird hit the glass and then he'd go out and collect the body for the collection. And he heard a really loud wham bird hitting the glass. And he went out to collect it thinking it was a hawk or something. And it was a duck. It was a male duck. and it had hit the glass so hard it had died. And there was another male duck who was very cheerfully, busily trying to mate with it. So, homosexual necrophilia in ducks. I love that story. All right, here's the other part of ducks. Females also have corkscrew shaped vaginas. Now, here's the fun part. In the females, the corkscrew goes the opposite direction of the male penis, which means that if the female does not want the male to mate with her, she can tighten up her vagina, and it's almost impossible for the male to get his penis in. A lot of these birds also have blind alleys. So they can control where, if they're mating with the male because he's been harassing them and she doesn't want him to father her children, she can kind of send that penis into a blind alley. The guy's happy, but the sperm goes into this little pocket on the side and doesn't end up fertilizing the eggs. Faith, is that enough about bird genitalia for you?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm getting ready to clear the screen. I probably should have given you a not safe for bystanders in the room warning. Yeah. Male ducks are really assholes. Yes, Rebecca, I can explain that again. So, gonna do is draw a female duck vagina. I'm exaggerating this, obviously. And it's got these pockets off to the side. And she's gonna mate with a guy, but she doesn't want him to father her children. So she allows his penis to come in, but she sends it into this blind alley. And so all the little sperm, see, how should I designate sperm? All the little sperm end up in this blind alley and are not able to fertilize the egg, because fertilization has to happen up here. Does that clear that up for you? She would do this basically if she's being harassed by a male duck to the point where she's had enough, but she doesn't think he would produce good offspring. She'll do this just so he'll leave her alone. Yeah. All right. Going to clear those drawings. So that's the reproductive structures. Remember, we've been talking internal anatomy. Now I want to talk about the senses. Now, you guys probably have heard that people have 5 senses. Well, all animals, all vertebrate animals have more than 5 senses. Even you have more than 5 senses. The 5 senses that we all get taught about in school are what we call special senses. And of course, we all know these: vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. The other senses include things like balance, being able to know what the temperature is, you know, if you're hot or you're cold, as well as things that we really don't think about, like what's your blood sugar? Your body has to know what your blood sugar level is. So sometimes 6. We've got a lot more than 6 senses if we go to all the general senses. Or are you thinking of the vomeronasal?
I meant like the 6 senses. Like if you believe in supernatural stuff.
Oh. Yeah. If you want to start putting supernatural stuff in, you've got to start getting up to like the 10th sense, because we've got a lot more than just 5. Okay. So we're going to walk through these special senses, and we're going to add one called magnetoreception, which is a sense in birds that we don't seem to have. So we're going to talk about 6 special senses in birds. If you move into things like fish, they also have electroreception, where they can detect electrical currents. So there's a lot more than just the usual list here. Okay, so let's start with, and isn't this a beautiful bird? People talk about vultures being ugly, but this one's beautiful. We're going to start with vision. Now, we already saw that video of the goshawk maneuverability. So I'm not going to show you that one. I want to talk about this before we start looking at videos. So first off, bird vision is better than mammal vision. Period, end of story. Generally speaking, their eyes are larger compared to the size of their body than ours. They have a faster ability to focus, so they can focus on something much faster than we can. And some people just say they are 2 eyes with wings. Now, our vision is what's called, I'm not going to call that, trichromic. So we have 3 types of color vision receptors in our eyes. So we can detect these 3 colors, and all the other colors we see are combinations of those 3. Birds have 4 types of color receptors. They can see in the ultraviolet range and lots of color combinations that we cannot see. I would love to be able to see like a bird for an afternoon, but then I'd probably be depressed for the rest of my life at how dull our world is. Okay, they have binocular vision. So binocular vision means that both eyes can focus on the same object at the same time, which allows for a person being able to tell depth of field or how far away something is from you. If you only can see, if you can only focus on something with one eye, it's hard to tell how far away things are. Birds have a nictitating membrane, sometimes called the third eyelid, that can come across the eye. It is translucent, so the bird can see through it. So the bird, if it gets something in its eye while it's flying, that nictitating membrane can come across and clear whatever got into the eye without the bird losing the ability to see. Because you can imagine if you're flying, especially if you're one of these really fast birds that could fly at 100 miles an hour, you don't want to not be able to see even for a split second. Okay. I am going to have to erase some of this, so go ahead and do your screenshot. Birds cannot move their eyes in the socket. So if they want to see something off to the side, they must turn their heads. But they can also hold their head steady when their body is moving. So I don't think this video, oh, it looks like that link is dead. All right. Oh, shoot. That's the problem. Okay. I'm going to try and show you what I mean when I say talk about holding the head steady. Okay, you guys should be seeing a video. Now, this is not holding the head steady yet. This is a peregrine flying. A guy jumped out of a balloon to film this bird in the air. And the guy was in free fall. You can see how the wings are not spread out. The bird caught that lure. So the guy threw this lure out the plane window, dived after it, and the bird flew down and caught up with that lure. I mean, you can see how fast that bird just went right past the guy filming it. I don't know why I put that in here. That's not the one I wanted to see. Come on. Okay, so here's what I was talking about. Yes, yes, yes. See how the body is the guy's moving the bird's body around, but the bird's head is not moving. It's staying in the exact same spot. That is unique to birds. We can't do that. But this is really important because, like everything else in birds' worlds, flight. Got to be able to keep their eye on, for this guy, prey species, but also where they're going and what they might be hitting. All right. Stop the video, go back to our PowerPoint. All right, I've got a couple more comments to make on vision. Seabirds have specialized eyes that can see much better than us in hazy or foggy conditions. You know, we think we can't see well in fog. Nothing can see well in fog. Seabirds can actually see relatively well in foggy conditions. And that last bird that I was showing you with the gyroscopic head thing going was an American kestrel. An American kestrel can see a 2-millimeter insect. A 2-millimeter insect is that big on my ruler. I don't know if you can see that. Maybe 1/4 of an inch. And they can spot that from the top of an 18-meter tree. 18 meters is about around 55 feet. So that's 4 stories. So from a 4-story building, it can spot 1/4 of an inch insect on the ground. Talk about vision. Okay, hopefully everybody's impressed. If you want another screenshot, now's the time. Smell. Most birds have a poor sense of smell. Why did I put that in caps? There is an urban myth that if you pick a baby bird up and put it back in the nest, the parents will smell you and reject the baby. Not true. If you find a baby bird on the ground, if it's warm to the touch and you can put it back in the nest, great. If it's cold, it needs to be warmed up before put back in the nest, because the parents can tell if the baby is cold, which usually indicates that it's sick or dying. And so they're rejecting the baby because they think it's sick, because it's cold, not because you touched it. So there are exceptions. The beloved turkey vulture. Not all vultures, but the turkey vulture can smell carrion, dead things. Some seabirds can smell fish oil, so they can literally smell the fish. or fishing boats. And the kiwi, you know, that kind of football looking bird with the really long bill, they can smell earthworms. That's what they eat. They eat earthworms. And so they can smell the earthworm while the earthworm is under the ground. And they have pretty bad vision. So that's kind of the smell thing. Not a lot to say here. Yep, screenshot it. All right, hearing. So as a general rule, there's not a lot of room for me to write on here, is there? As a general rule, birds can differentiate or tell the difference between sounds better than we can. I think the kestrel is actually a falcon, not a hawk. I think. But I could be wrong about that one. It's either a hawk or a falcon. They're adorable birds. Oh my God. When I was doing wildlife rehab, I loved it when we got kestrels in because they are just jam. They're you know, they're this big, but they're jam-packed with personality. We're not supposed to interact with birds in rehab. It was always very hard with the kestrels because they, you know, we'd put a visual barrier in front of their cage and they hated that. And they would be looking around the edge of the towel and trying to see what was going on. Really kind of cute. Okay. Birds also hear faster than we do. And they can distinguish, or they can recognize different voices in their flock, in a flock of birds. So we have, you know, if you've got a flock of birds outside, say goldfinches, you can hear the goldfinches and they all sound kind of really similar. But to a goldfinch, they go, ah, Bob, Mary, Joe are all over here and Tom's over this way. So they can tell who is singing and where they are. Much, much better than we can. We can recognize people's voices pretty well. That's kind of a not surprising that birds can tell bird voices better than we can. Now, owls can hear with directionality. How can I put this? They can tell the direction a sound is coming from. And that is because they have asymmetrical ear openings. So if we look at this image in the bottom, you can see somebody has parted the feathers so you can see in the owl's ear canal. That's a huge freaking ear. The opening on one side of the head is higher up and shaped slightly differently than the ear opening on the other side of the head. And that allows owls to tell with incredible ability where a sound is coming from. Not just from the left or the right, but also a little right of center or straight ahead. And they can tell that because the amount of time it takes for the sound to get into the ear and into the part of the ear that actually detects the sound is different because of the different shape and the asymmetry of those ear openings. And that's the overview of hearing for birds. What makes it different than us? One being smaller than the other does not make things worse. It actually would help with their ability to tell exactly where the sound is coming from. It's kind of complicated. I don't want to get into, yeah, I know it's confusing. I don't want to get into the details because I don't want to describe exactly how hearing works. But yeah, if you want to look up how hearing works, maybe try for human hearing, you can probably try Crash Course on YouTube. They have an anatomy series. And if you get that basics down, and email me, I'd be happy to explain the specifics of the owl hearing. I just don't have time to go into hearing in detail. All right, clearing the images. So we're almost done with internal anatomy. Magnetoreception. This is the ability to detect Earth's magnetic field. It's used in navigation. So if we think about the Earth, I'd rather have that a lighter color. If we think about the Earth, there are lines of magnetism that circle the Earth. They kind of come out from the North Pole and go into the South Pole. But they're not uniform everywhere. So some places have more magnetic force than others. And boy, howdy, is this one complicated. So I'm not going to go into that. But birds can detect these magnetic fields, and they can use those to tell where they are and which direction is which. So it's like having a compass in your head. They always know which way is north. We know that there is some kind of role for iron or a metal pigment. And we know that this is located in one eye. The details on how it works, really, we don't have a great understanding of this. But if you strap a magnet to a homing pigeon, it will get lost. Oh shit, I am over time. Okay, we'll come back and do magnetoreception next week.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye, everybody.
Bye.